For 3 days, Sally didn't call. No texts. No voicemails. No surprise drop-ins. At first, I thought it was a blessing. I told myself maybe Jeff's firm stance had finally set a boundary. Maybe she'd realized she couldn't bulldoze her way into our marriage. But by the 4th day, I saw the worry lines deepen on Jeff's face. He paced the living room after work, his phone in hand, checking it every few minutes. "She always calls," he muttered. "Even when we argue. Especially when we argue." I tried to reassure him. Maybe she just needs space. He shook his head. "That's not her. Silence isn't her thing. If she's quiet, something's wrong." That was when I realized it. Sally had shifted strategies. This wasn't withdrawal. It was a performance of absence. The silence itself was the weapon. On the 5th day, Jeff cracked. "I'm going over there." My chest tightened. "Jeff, I can't just sit here. What if she's sick? What if she fell? What if she's pulling you back in?" I finished for him. He stopped staring at me. "Maria, she's my mom." I sighed. "I know. But please, Jeff, don't let her use your love as a leash." He didn't answer. He grabbed his keys and left. I sat on the couch, staring at the door after him. My stomach knotted. Every instinct in me screamed this was exactly what Sally wanted. When Jeff came back later that night, he was pale. "She wasn't home," he said quietly. "The lights were off. The mail was piling up. Her car was gone." "Maybe she's visiting a friend?" I suggested, though even to my own ears it sounded weak. He shook his head. "She doesn't just disappear like that." And that's when the guilt started eating at him. The next morning, Jeff called her cell. No answer. He called again at lunch. Nothing. By dinner, he was pacing again, his voice tight. What if something happened to her? What if she... He cut himself off, his eyes haunted. I knew exactly where his mind was going. Sally had laid her trap perfectly. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying her parting words in my head. "You'll regret dismissing me like this." This was it. The silence wasn't random. It was punishment. A slow tightening of the noose around Jeff's conscience. On the 7th day, Jeff broke. He sat at the kitchen table, his hands clenched into fists. "I can't take this anymore. I'm filing a missing persons report." My breath caught. "Jeff, no. She's my mother, Maria. What if she's lying in a ditch somewhere and I did nothing?" His voice cracked. I reached across the table, grabbing his hands. "Or what if she's sitting at a friend's house, watching you unravel? What if this is exactly what she wants?" His jaw tightened, his eyes glassy. "And what if you're wrong? What if she really needs me and I turn my back on her?" I had no answer. Because in that moment, I realized Sally's silence wasn't just about pulling him back. It was about driving a wedge between us. If Jeff filed that report, she'd win. If he didn't and something really was wrong, he'd never forgive me. Either way, Sally was tightening her grip. And as I sat there, holding Jeff's trembling hands, a cold thought settled in my chest. The war had stopped being about money. Now, it was about control of Jeff's very heart. And I was losing ground. On the 8th day, Sally called. Jeff's phone lit up just as we were finishing dinner, his fork clattering against the plate as he grabbed it. "Mom? Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." I sat frozen across the table, watching his face shift between relief, frustration, and, inevitably, guilt. Her voice carried even from where I sat her day. "Oh, Jeffrey, I didn't mean to worry you. I just needed time. Time to think. Time." His voice cracked. "Mom, I went by your house." The lights were off. The mail was piling up. "Yes, well," she interrupted smoothly, "I was staying with an old friend. Carol from my church group. You wouldn't know her." Jeff ran a hand down his face. "Why didn't you tell me? You can't just disappear like that." There was a pause. Then, in that soft, fragile tone she used when she wanted to pierce his heart, Sally said, "Because you made it very clear I wasn't wanted. I thought maybe you'd be happier if I just disappeared." The words were knives. I could see Jeff flinch as if she'd struck him. "Mom, no. That's not. I don't want to be a burden, Jeffrey. You have your wife now. You don't need me." My chest tightened. There it was. The classic guilt hook. Jeff's eyes darted to me, torn between anger and shame. Mom, of course I need you. You're my mother. But you can't play games like this. Games, she whispered, her voice cracking. So that's what you think of me. And just like that, Jeff's frustration collapsed into panic. No, Mom, please. I didn't mean it that way. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, motioning for him to hand me the phone. But Jeff shook his head, clutching it tighter. I'll come by tomorrow, he said, his voice low and desperate. We'll talk, okay? Sally sniffled softly. If you really want to. When he hung up, the silence in our dining room was suffocating. Maria, he said finally, she thinks I don't need her anymore. Do you know what that does to her? I clenched my fists. Jeff, she's manipulating you. She vanished for a week just to make you feel guilty. That's not love, that's control. He slammed his hands on the table, startling me. She's my mother. I swallowed hard, my own temper threatening to flare. And I'm your wife. His shoulders slumped. The fire drained from his face, leaving only exhaustion. I don't want to fight with you. Then don't let her keep putting us in the ring, I said softly. He stared at his empty plate for a long time before whispering, I don't know how to choose between you. That night, he lay awake beside me, tossing and turning. And I realized the most dangerous part of Sally's silence wasn't the absence. It was the return. Because she'd come back not just with guilt, but with a reminder that she could disappear whenever she wanted. That she controlled the tension, the pace, the very air we breathed. And Jeff? He was already preparing to run to her side. The next morning, Jeff was out the door before I'd even finished my coffee. He barely touched breakfast, muttering only, I'm going to Mom's. I need to make sure she's okay. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to grab his arm and beg him not to go. But the look in his eyes told me I'd only push him closer to her if I tried. So I let him go. The hours crawled. I paced the living room, glancing at the clock every 10 minutes. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I called him, straight to voicemail. By 3, my nerves were shot. When his car finally pulled into the driveway, I was waiting at the door. How was she? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Jeff's face was pale, his eyes heavy. She looked frail, Maria. Like she hadn't eaten properly in days. She said she's been feeling dizzy, lightheaded. I crossed my arms. And you believe that? He bristled. I saw it. She was trembling when she stood. Her hands shook when she tried to pour tea. Jeff, she staged it. The words came out sharper than I intended. She knows exactly what strings to pull. You think she didn't plan this? The silence, then the dramatic return, now the sick act. His jaw tightened. She's not acting. She's 72, Maria. She's not invincible. I softened my tone, stepping closer. I know she's not. But you know her. Doesn't this feel like another way to pull you back in? He shook his head, running both hands through his hair. Maybe not. But what if it's real this time? What if she really needs me and I dismiss it as some ploy? That was Sally's genius. She made doubt itself her weapon. Jeff sank onto the couch, his shoulders slumped. She told me she's been alone too much. That she feels like I abandoned her for you. The words stung more than I expected. Not because they surprised me, but because I could hear the truth of how Jeff carried them. She said, he continued, his voice breaking, that she sometimes wonders if she should even be around anymore. If she's just in the way. My heart clenched. That wasn't just guilt. That was emotional blackmail. Jeff, I sat beside him, my hand on his arm. She wants you to feel like her lifeline. She wants you to believe that without you, she has no reason to live. But that's not fair. To either of us. His eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do, Maria. If I pull away, she withers. If I get closer, you and I suffer. I wanted to tell him there was a third way, that we could set boundaries, that we could stand firm together. But I knew he wasn't ready to hear it. Because Sally had gotten to him. Again. That night, he made her soup and promised to check on her tomorrow. And though he came home to me, I felt the distance stretching between us like an invisible rope, one end tied to him, the other firmly in Sally's hands. And me? I was caught in the middle, wondering how long before that rope snapped. Jeff insisted on going back to Sally's the very next evening. He brought groceries this time: vegetables, chicken broth, tea. He even stopped at the bakery for her favorite muffins. I watched him load the bags into the car, his jaw set, determination written all over him. "She needs me," he said simply, and drove off. I didn't argue. I just stood in the doorway, my arms wrapped tight around myself, and prayed he'd see through her act. When he came home later, I noticed the smell of chicken broth on his jacket. He looked tired, but there was a strange pride in his face, like he'd done something heroic. "She ate the soup," he said softly. And for a moment, she looked better. I forced a smile. "That's good." But deep down, I couldn't shake the image of Sally sitting in her armchair, hands trembling just enough to look pitiful, waiting for Jeff to swoop in with groceries like a dutiful son. By the third visit that week, I couldn't stay home anymore. I told Jeff I wanted to come with him. He hesitated. "Maria, I don't want to put you in the middle." "I'm already in the middle," I said firmly. "I want to see her." So I went. Sally opened the door wearing a pale pink cardigan and slippers, her hair brushed neatly, her face touched with just enough makeup to look natural. She smiled weakly, leaning on the doorframe for effect. "Oh, Maria," she said softly, like my name itself was an effort. "It's so good to see you." I smiled back, though my jaw ached from holding it in place. "How are you feeling?" She sighed dramatically, pressing a hand to her chest. "Some days are better than others. Today, well, I'm managing." I glanced around the house as we stepped inside. The kitchen counters were spotless, the sink empty, the garbage neatly taken out. Not the picture of a woman too weak to manage. Jeff busied himself unloading groceries, his back turned. I took the chance to study Sally closer. Her hands, steady as she smoothed her cardigan. Her steps, sure as she moved to the armchair. The frailness slipped when she thought no one was looking. But the moment Jeff turned back around, her body seemed to sag, her smile fading into a brave little wince. "Jeffrey, you're too good to me," she murmured, accepting the tea he brewed. My blood boiled. We sat for an hour. Sally talked about how lonely the house felt, how the walls echoed at night. She made small sighs, clutching her teacup as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. But then when Jeff stepped outside to take a call from work, I saw it. She stood smoothly, no wobble, no hesitation, and carried her cup to the sink with ease. She rinsed it, dried it, placed it neatly in the cabinet. Her movements were efficient, steady. When she turned and saw me watching, her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Then, just as Jeff's footsteps returned, her shoulders slumped, her hand returned to her chest, and she lowered herself into the chair with a faint groan. "Everything okay?" Jeff asked, stepping inside. "Yes, darling," Sally whispered, her voice fragile again. "Just a little tired." I wanted to scream. On the drive home, I sat in silence, my hands clenched in my lap. Jeff kept glancing at me. "You were awfully quiet tonight. What's wrong?" I swallowed hard. "Jeff, do you really not see it?" "See what?" "She's putting on a show. The weakness, the trembling. It all disappears the second you turn away." His grip tightened on the wheel. "Maria, don't. Please. Don't say that. Because you know I'm right." He shook his head furiously. "No. She's my mother. She wouldn't lie about something like this." I turned to the window, fighting back the frustration clawing at my throat. But I knew what I saw. And for the first time, I realized Sally wasn't just playing Jeff. She was testing me too. The next time we visited, I asked Jeff if I could bring dessert. He smiled, grateful, and I baked a pie, the kind my grandmother used to make. It wasn't for Sally's benefit. It was for me. A piece of strength I could carry into her house. We arrived just before sunset. The house glowed warmly, the smell of lavender cleaner hanging in the air. Sally greeted us with her now familiar weak smile, her hand fluttering to her chest as though opening the door itself had cost her energy. "Jeffrey," she said breathlessly. "And Maria. How lovely." Jeff slipped past me with the grocery bag, already fussing in the kitchen. I stayed in the doorway a moment longer, meeting her eyes. "Hi, Sally," I said evenly. "I brought pie." Her gaze flicked to the dish in my hands, then back to me. Something cold flashed in her eyes before she smoothed it over with another feeble smile. "How thoughtful of you," she murmured. We ate in the living room. Jeff sat beside Sally, handing her tea and making sure her blanket was tucked neatly around her legs. I sat across from them watching, waiting. Halfway through dessert, Jeff's phone buzzed. Work. He excused himself, stepping outside to take the call. The air in the room changed instantly. Sally set her fork down, no trembling this time, and leaned back in her chair with the grace of someone who'd been holding herself up for years. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp and unflinching. "You saw," she said flatly. My stomach tightened. I saw. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Good. Then let's not play pretend with each other." The honesty in her voice was more chilling than the act itself. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "Because," she said, folding her hands neatly in her lap, "Jeffrey is all I have, and I won't lose him. Not to you. Not to anyone." My breath caught. "You don't have to lose him. He's your son. He loves you. He loves you more." Her tone was sharp, unflinching. "And that, my dear, is unacceptable." I stared at her, stunned by the brazenness of it. "You think you can manipulate him forever?" I whispered. Her smile widened, but her eyes stayed cold. "Forever is such a dramatic word. Let's just say long enough. Long enough that he never questions where his loyalties lie." My hands tightened in my lap. "That's not loyalty, Sally. That's control." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Call it whatever you like. I raised him. I shaped him. And now you think you'll come along and undo all of that." I opened my mouth, but she raised her hand, cutting me off. "Maria, you can be clever, you can be patient, but you will never truly win. Because when Jeffrey looks at me, he sees obligation. He sees guilt. And guilt is stronger than love." The words hit me like a blow. And then, just as quickly as she had transformed, she reclined into her chair, her body sagging, her eyes fluttering half-closed. By the time Jeff walked back in, she was coughing weakly into her handkerchief. "Mom, are you all right?" He rushed to her side, kneeling at her feet. She smiled faintly, her voice fragile again. "Yes, darling. Just a little spell. Nothing to worry about." Jeff fussed over her, completely blind to the steel that had glinted in her eyes moments earlier. I sat frozen, the pie cooling untouched on my plate. For the first time, I realized Sally wasn't just meddling. She wasn't just difficult. She was declaring war.